Thank you very much, all that has made log in to this webinar. I see more than 25 attendees, and still a number is growing. Among attendees, I see many friends and familiar names. That's also great. And of course, I welcome our panelists. Just for the sake of formality, let me introduce myself. I'm Jerzy Pomianowski, the Executive Director of the European Endowment for Democracy. I think logo behind me speaks for itself. And it is my great pleasure to invite all of you to this webinar that is devoted to the Ukrainian Civil Society Manifesto, which they call Lugano Declaration because it was specifically prepared for the Lugano Recovery Conference that took place on July 3rd this year. This opening webinar of the International Democracy Day in Brussels event is specifically introduced as a part of the set of events which are designed to celebrate the UN International Day of Democracy. If you would like to see the full program of Democracy Day as organized by partners here in Brussels, please go to the website that is idd/brussels.eu or to any of websites of partner organization, European Endowment for Democracy or European Partnership for Democracy or IDEA International, and ENOP, as far as I remember, is also one of our co-organizers. So this event is part of the bigger framework, and I'm very much happy that we can start with this very important topic. This Civil Society Manifesto, as I said, was presented during the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Lugano, and it is important to also understand what does it mean, Civil Society Manifesto, because people who feel responsible for their country, who represent civil society, they want to be present at every opportunity where they can voice their ideas and concerns. And that was the case also with regard to the conference held in Lugano. The conference and all efforts are mainly organized by governments, but that doesn't mean that strong voice from civil society should be absent. And this is something that we, especially at EED, admire, because this is the core principle of the democracy, that everyone who wants to say something is allowed to say something, not only those who are formally authorized. That is the nature of democracy. The will to speak is good enough reason to be heard. Today, over 250 organizations and civil society organizations in Ukraine endorse this specific manifesto. And today, panelists will explain us how it happened, what does it contain, and why they believe this manifesto is important. I'm delighted to welcome EED friend and also partner, Yuliia Bankova, who is already online to moderate this session. As I understand, all our partners and panelists are connecting from Ukraine, am I right? So we are extremely grateful to you to offer your time, and we hope your connection will stay as stable and as good quality as it is now. This is a very good sign that Ukraine stays strong and operational, and all services are working perfectly. So, Yuliia, over to you. Yuliia will introduce, but I will just mention the names: Oleksandra Matviychuk, Andriy Dligach, and possibly also Svetlana Matviychuk. But first, let me conclude with the introduction of Yuliia, who herself is a prominent activist in the civic movement against censorship. And Yuliia is chief editor of Liganet, a leading online business media in Ukraine, and she was also one of the founder of the NGO Hromadske, NGO media outlet Hromadske TV. Now, Yuliia, over to you. Thank you very much for your willingness to moderate this webinar, and I wish you a very good discussion and presentation. We are now having 51 attendees, and it is still growing, so very happy to formally welcome you and start this webinar. Now, over to you, Yuliia. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. Thank you, Jerzy. Hello to everyone. Thank you for the invitation. And it's my pleasure to welcome all you to this event focused on the Ukrainian civil society and particularly this manifesto, Lugano Declaration. I think that I can start with the point that I think that every one of us, of Ukrainians, I think, and our panelists understood, and now that sometimes and in most cases, Ukrainian civil society is much more stronger than the state and authorities in Ukraine. And me know this very well because I also was an activist. I was fighting against censorship and for freedom of speech during Yanukovych presidency. So everyone knows what is it to be a civil society activist, and it's very important for Ukraine. So thank you for this opportunity to discuss the role of civil society in Ukraine. I would like to welcome our panelists, and let me introduce two of them. Unfortunately, Svetlana Matviychuk can't join us because of technical problems. So let me introduce Oleksandra Matviychuk. Oleksandra is a Ukrainian human rights defender and leader of the non-profit organization, the Center for Civil Liberties. And in June 2021, Oleksandra was nominated to the United Nations Committee Against Torture and made history as Ukraine's first female candidate to the UN treaty body. The second panelist is Andriy Dligach. Andriy is a co-founder of the Center for Economic Recovery and the civil platform Nova Kraina. And also, Andriy has more than 20 years of experience in running consulting projects in the field of strategic management, marketing and marketing research, change management, and futurology. So let me start from the first question about this role of civil society, and maybe start with the changing of role of civil society during the full-scale war. Do you think that this role has changed after full-scale invasion, after 21st of February? Oleksandra.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. I would like to start the answering to the question with the point that for these 6 months, civil society in Ukraine has fairly expanded. Before February 24, sociology indicate that 8% of state population have been regularly involved into social well-being activity, and the rest had adapted and lived as so-called ordinary people. But presently, there is hardly anyone indifferent left. Many ordinary people commit extraordinary things, risking their own life for the sake of others. And it's true about not only for ordinary people who join the Ukrainian army. My friend had to collect every remaining fragment of her husband's body into a bag. He was a civilian. A shell tore him apart when he, as a volunteer, was taking people out of the sieged Ukrainian city. Authoritarian regime perceived that the world through a specific lens, and Putin thought that only the armed forces of Ukraine would oppose him. He misjudged. All the people of Ukraine resist him. And suddenly it appeared that people are more significant than the army number 2 in the world, that the efforts of the ordinary people throughout Ukraine have practical results and advance Ukrainian victory in this war. And here arises a question: what is victory for Ukraine? And what is the role of the civil society in it? In the war with Russia, we fight for our freedom within all of its dimensions, for freedom to be independent people, and for freedom to have a democratic choice that is such, for the right to live and develop the country where each person's rights are protected, the government is accountable, justice is independent, and the police do not beat a peaceful students' demonstration at Maidan. And thus, the objective of Ukrainian civil society in this war is not only to oust Russians outward their constitutional borders, but also to conduct a democratic transformation of the state and to build a sustainable democratic institutions.
Thank you, Oleksandra. Yes, I agree that the role and everyone was helping and joined this war against authoritarianism and against Russia. And I can say that maybe there is no one. I mean that businesses, ordinary people like my mother, my father, teachers. Everyone joined this army of civil society, and we saw that how much businesses, entrepreneurs started to help and join against Russia. So as for me, I think that we saw something like that in 2014, because at first days of start that war, this war in 2014, we also saw that civil society equipped army, equipped soldiers, support every on the front line. So maybe this time it's much more. So everyone sees this support of civil society, and I agree. Andriy, do you see this? How is civil society viewed in Ukraine today in the war context? What can you say about this? I know that you are involved in this also business community, and you can tell maybe from this point of view.
Yes, you are absolutely right. Now business involved much more than it was involved 8 years ago. If in 2014, approximately 30% of businesses started to help army or realize volunteers projects, now more than 70% of entrepreneurs and their businesses are involved. Despite of 40% of Ukrainian enterprises are now stopped or almost stopped. But I think that we as a business and civil society, we almost lost after the Maidan in 2014, because politicians in Ukraine in fact used the result of Maidan in order to conserve a lot of policies, a lot of institutions in our country, and these institutions remain inclusive, modernized, etc. Despite of several civil movements like a renovation package of reforms or the civil platform in new country, try to institutionalize civil society. Despite of the huge help of EED, that time we still remain atomized as civil society, not so strong. And in fact, 2014, 2015, better to say, and next year's emphasis or highlighted that that civil society is not, it doesn't have one voice, does not influence on policy making in our country. But it was up to 2019 when civil society tried to become stronger again. And as Jerzy mentioned, in 2022, this year, a few months ago, we finally found a way how to make this one voice of civil society. We started the next wave of consolidation in business sphere, where the more than 90 business clubs or associations made a special coalition of business environment for modernization. And the same process with the Lugano Declaration, with the manifesto started for civil society, where more than 300 civil organizations jointly prepared this manifesto, and now trying to find a way how to become stronger, how to influence on policy making in Ukraine.
How do you think? Why does it happen? Has it happened because of war, or it's some natural process? Because of politicians, I can say that maybe against. So Ukrainian politicians often force us to unite. I mean, in a negative way. I mean, so this time, is it because of war, or we are adult enough?
If Oleksandra, let me start with this answer. I can say that the following. Unfortunately, Ukrainian government authorities doesn't consider that civil society is something which exists at all. They do not consider that they should communicate to us to have inclusive process for policy making, for elaborating a country vision. We're still a country without the vision, without official vision. The only official vision for us is Euro-Atlantic integration. That's all. But we as a civil society saw the main problem nowadays that Ukrainian government authorities try to elaborate recovery program and recovery plan by themselves, and then to present this as a final work to our international partners, and to realize this plan without civil society, without business, Ukrainian business communities. So we saw that Ukrainian government authorities tries to agree with our international partners this plan without the voice of civil society. And we decided to emphasize in this manifesto and in our approaches that this should be realized, this plan of modernization, not only recovery, but modernization of Ukraine should be realized in such a triangle with 100% involvement of Ukrainian business and Ukrainian civil society. In this triangle, we jointly with European institutions and our international partners can realize the anti-corruption agenda. But jointly with the Ukrainian government authorities, we can realize Ukrainian interest, pragmatic interest, and interest of modernization of economy and society. So this triangle is a name of our coalitions of this manifesto to promote idea of inclusive process for the recovery plan and other policy making.
Oleksandra, do you want to add any other reasons why Ukrainian society is possible to straight grow?
I will just remind you that this war started not in February 2022, but in February 2014, when after collapse of the authoritarian regime, Ukraine got a chance to provide a quick democratic transformations. And in order to stop us on this way, on this path to Euro-integration, which was outlined by Revolution of Dignity, Putin occupied Crimea and started the war in the Donbass, which lasted for 8 years. And parallel with defending our country, Ukraine provided reforms. And the secret of these reforms was initially in activity of civil society actors. And the recipe of Ukrainian reforms for these 8 years was Ukrainian society push, international community push, and very slow, non-repair state machine starting to move in the right direction. And this is why Ukrainian civil society understand their role in the democratic transformation of the country during the large-scale Russian aggression. We will win this war, as I told before, not only when we withdraw Russian troops from Ukraine, but when we provide a quantitative leap and escape from the zone of transition in which we stuck for decades.
Thank you. Let's continue with this Lugano Declaration and tell me please and our audience, why is it important? What is the aim? Why should it work?
I can start. The Lugano Declaration is a framework manifesto of the Civil Society of Ukraine, which was endorsed by more than 215 civil society representatives before the Ukrainian Recovery Conference that took place in Switzerland on July. In terms of census, this is a declaration of the common principles and frames of the future, for the sake of which millions of Ukrainians are risking their own lives every day. We have determined the criteria to be met by all the decisions concerning the future structure and recovery of our country. We have also prioritized the goals for the recovery and development of the country and defined red lines, the intersection of which is unacceptable under any circumstances, as it implies existential risk to Ukraine and to Ukrainian people. But from the practical perspective, this is a clear message to international community saying that Ukrainian civil society is an equal partner at the same level as government of Ukraine, and it undertakes its responsibility for the democratic transformation and recovery of Ukraine. This is our ambition to be involved into the process of democratic transformation of our country.
We didn't use the Lugano Declaration as the final document, which will be a kind of vision declaration for Ukrainian civil society and Ukraine as it is. But we, using this Lugano Declaration, started visionary process. And Lugano Declaration consists of principles, the most important principles as a task for future vision and policies development. First of all, we mentioned that Ukraine, in fact, is a state with European identity, European values. Sometimes even Ukraine shows leadership in defending the European values, especially now during this war. Then we mentioned that Ukraine should remain as a representative democracy with inclusive political process, with political lifts, etc. then we mentioned that very important, strongly important to keep Ukraine as an open market economy and to increase the level of freedom for business. Now Ukraine is not good with business culture, with the business environment. Too regulated country with a high level of state in economy. And so it should be changed using the future policies. Then the most important part for us that Ukraine should remain open-minded country with a low level of monopolizing without the monopolizing of political process, not a transparent country with transparent policy making process. For sure, now we see that in some spheres, first of all, in the defense sphere, we do not have enough democracy, and it's obvious. It's not a time for democratic process and the defending of our country. But we should be ready to protect democratic procedures and processes after their winning this war in every sphere of life of Ukraine. It's a very important part of our declaration.
How do you think, what kind of very specific steps or support could international community give Ukrainian civil society in order to make this this declaration not just declaration, but to make it working document, working process? So what kind of help do we need for recovering? Because sometimes, you know, that I have a feeling that, for example, with this anti-corruption prosecutor, when the Ukrainian civil society pushed this, while only Ukrainian civil society pushed this problem, no one hear us. But only when international partners started to push Ukrainian government, we got the result. So what do we need? It looks like the way is much shorter than we use, because we go to international partners, we go to Ukrainian government, call for them and propose them some plans, some agenda. They don't hear us. Then we go to international partners, tell about that problem, and they push our government. So it's really three part of the process. So what kind of help do we need from international partners? Maybe in order to make this, to make some strategical help, to make this process shorter, and to force Ukrainian government hear Ukrainian civil society.
Maybe I will start. I will start with the task for civil society itself. I think in order to achieve this goal, we have to overcome fragmentation. What do I mean? When anti-corruption organizations promote anti-corruption agenda, human rights organizations promote human rights agenda, ecologists promote agenda for defending environment, we need to cooperate and to be able to create a common civil society agenda. And Lugano Declaration is the first step of this consolidation process. That's why it's very essential and important sign. When we speak about international community, I will start with the point that I have been defending human rights for over 20 years, and for 8 of them during the war unleashed by Russia. Presently, armies are speaking because beforehand, human rights defenders were not heard. We might have been heard at the meetings of the conventional or monitoring mechanism of human rights protection, but definitely not at the assembly halls where people in power take their decision. And if the world prefers to prevent the situation where no one else but only strong armies have the authority, then the voice of the human rights defenders and civil society as such require greater support. And particular to the process of democratic transformation of Ukraine, we require both fast and qualitative European integration of Ukraine. This war has caused the circumstances when many specialized civil organizations, which for years have been operating in the areas of human rights protection, anti-corruptional activities, reforming, etc., were forced to undertake new duties in order to help the state to withstand and people to survive in the times of Russian aggression. Obviously, during the war times, the civil society faces difficulties in applying advocacy tools and complications to affect the decision-making process. And this is a reason why we require more resolute support of civil society voices at the political level of the EU itself and member states of EU. EU should operate in a close coordination with the civil society in 3 areas. The first one implies to determine the transformation to be conducted for the European integration. The second one is about ensuring qualitative implementation. And the third one should estimate the achieved results. So all these 3 areas, EU has done together, should done together with Ukrainian civil society. And we need EU to consider Ukrainian civil society as an important partner on par with the government of Ukraine.
Thank you, Oleksandra. Andriy, yes.
Yeah. Our president said on the very beginning of this stage of the war that we need 3 things: weapon, weapon, weapon. Now I can add that we need 3 more things, not only weapon, but also we need, as Oleksandra mentioned, the very clear European perspectives and NATO integration perspectives, but also we need economic support and carte blanche for Ukrainian breakthrough. 3 months ago on the London conference in London, it was a first conference of the chain of conferences concerning Ukrainian recovery. I heard from our international partners 3 very important things for me. First of all, that Ukrainian vision should be elaborated by Ukraine. That Ukraine should take a leadership in this process. The second one, that our European partners understand that we need not only recovery in economic sphere and infrastructure in society, but we need the complete modernization in every sphere of Ukrainian life. And the third very important thing for me, that it should start now, not after our win over the Russia, not in next year. Not next year, but now. Start now. It's a very important thing for me, and we really need support from our international partners in this idea. What we see now, that we do not have clear perspectives. We have promises, a lot of promises, but not plans. We do see support from the Western world, from the developed countries, but we do not have enough financial support for not only for surviving, but for fast recovery, etc. And the third point, we do not see enough support to be free to be strong in realizing social and economic reforms. We as a country needs to realize strong breakthroughs in economic spheres, including tax reform, deregulation, privatization, and we need support from international institutions for realizing these ideas. We need the very big changes in social sphere, in education sphere, in healthcare sphere in Ukraine. And we need strong support during the next years from our international partners, first of all from European Union, and understanding that we will meet European requirements not just now, but in few years. And we need this few years carte blanche to make Ukraine stronger, to realize these reforms, which partially are not corresponding the European rules, European directives. So we need these few years carte blanche and support from our partners.
Thank you, Andriy. And I have some questions. I think that they are very suited to continue our discussion. So how satisfied are you with the EU's instruments, priorities, strategies, programs, measures in that context? Oleksandra, are you satisfied?
We are very grateful for all support which Ukraine received from EU, especially in these dramatic times for Ukrainian people. And I want to emphasize on one important point when we speak about democratic transformation of a country. When we speak about reforming process and adapting the EU standards into Ukrainian ground, we have to understand the common logic of the process, that it's not only enough to adopt some concrete laws or to create some specific procedures or even open a new institutions, because non-formal values is always much more stronger than any formal institutions like laws or state bodies are. That's why when we implementing this Euro integration path plan, we need focus not only to some formalistic approach, but also working together with civil society to strengthen the general framework of the process, because all these laws, all these institutions are based on some energy. And this energy is a belief of people that rule of law is much more better than physical force or corruption or other things which can used besides rule of law. And in this regard, I will ask EU also to strengthen the ability of civil society to communicate directly with Ukrainian society in general. It's not like a surprise that any society in the war faced with a lot of challenges, because war provides as the results to limitation of human rights. And for us, it's important that all this limitation will be done only to the level which is necessity to be limited, not more. And it has to be communicate to Ukrainian authorities, it has to be communicate to general society, and all new reforms and changes on the level of legislation, on the level of institution, has been done also with enlightenment campaign and communication and to say this general frame is very important when we speak about democratization process.
Thank you, Oleksandra. Yeah.
I fully support, agree with Oleksandra, support your statements, and I can continue my previous speech in order to show an example what really we need to have from European Union as the support. You asked us to describe some more examples, and I'll try to show this the very interesting situation which is on the middle between different policy making process. One process is anti-corruption process, where we, during the last 8 years, we changed a lot of institutions, established a lot of new institutions, and we have, I can say, not 100% result with these changes. We still have corrupted economy and corrupted political system. But another the very important thing for me as a leader of business societies is a taxation process in Ukraine, taxation policies. We have high level of taxes which meet European requirements for now, but a lot of European countries now use the strong process for making their economy more interesting for investors, for entrepreneurs like Poland, Bulgaria, Romania, and Estonia, and some other European countries. They realized the taxation reforms which slightly do not meet European requirements, in fact. But for Ukraine, our European partners still ask us to meet the requirements of some EU directives. And my request to European partners is very simple: to consider taxation reform as a part of anti-corruption reform. We need to completely destroy corruption system in Ukraine, which based on corruption in taxation system, in custom, in state enterprises. And in order to make anti-corruption in Ukraine, we need to start with economic reforms, with taxation reform first of all, and to give to Ukraine possibility. I named it as carte blanche, several years of transformation period with the help of European Union and other our Western partners to do the economic reforms through these 3 to 5 years with your support, with European support. And then we can enlarge our taxes to meet requirements of European Union when we will join European Union as a full member.
Thank you, Andriy. And we have a lot of questions from the audience. Can I ask both of you to prioritize reforms at the time of war? The war may be protected, that is possible during this time, and what can only be done after the war? Because everything is important, but if we try to prioritize, what will be the first during the war?
I think that
Reforms.
It's a very big mistake to have priorities now, because we have the really it's thanks God we do not have only the huge troubles for Ukraine, but also we have a time possibilities. This is connected to our social sphere, to our economic sphere, and even to our human rights sphere. Even now, we should realize every important reform for Ukraine: court reform, anti-corruption reform, the bundle of economic reforms. Now, prioritization means that we will postpone some reforms and will wait for another window of possibilities. It will be the same problem as we had in 2014, as we postponed a lot of reforms, and in fact we lost in reformation, in modernization of our country. Now the main priority is modernization of every sphere of Ukrainian life.
Maybe
Oleksandra?
I will try to answer to this question with a bright example of last days when Ukrainian army defeat Russians and withdraw them from Kharkiv region. And at the range, Russia launched missiles attack and destroyed the energy power plant in Kharkiv region and deprived the huge city of Kharkiv without light, electricity, and water. So we have to understand that we was so lucky to, as a country, to be located with Russia as a neighbor. And even when we withdraw all Russian troops through Ukrainian territory, including Crimea and Lugansk and Donetsk regions, it doesn't mean that the war will stop, because before the transformation started in Russia itself, Russia will not refuse from their imperialistic sentiments. So we have to be ready to different kind of attack and work and have different dimension, not only military, but informational dimension, economical dimension, cyber dimension, etc. That's why I strongly support the thesis of Andriy that we have no time to wait when the war stopped to start a democratic transformation and to start a reforming process. For sure, we have to take into account that during the large-scale war, the possibilities are more limited, but still it's our task. So it's a very difficult task, but we have to work into two fronts. The first front, military fronts, to defeat Russians. And second, it's, let's name its value dimension, because this war has a very distant value dimension. And Putin tried to convince Ukrainians and the whole world that our values are false, that democracy, rule of law, and human rights are not working. Because if they are working, why they couldn't protect you during the war? So the only physical force matter Putin tried to promote. And that's why we always told that this is not a war between two countries, Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And we have to win the value dimension. We have to show the model of successful democratic transformation and the general impact which such transformation have to population. And when we will win this value dimension, it will have a huge effect to democratic future of Russia itself. I know this for sure, not only because I understand that Russia started this war not because Putin is afraid of NATO, but because Putin is afraid of idea of freedom, which become closer in 2014 to the Russian border. But also because I still very close communicate with our colleagues, Russian human rights defenders. And since the beginning of this war in 2014, they are under severe persecutions. They labeled like foreign agent, they accused in fabricated criminal and administrative charge, a lot of regional human rights defenders now in prisons. And when I asked this minority in Russia, I mean, brave people who stand for democracy and human rights, how we can help them, they always respond, be successful. If you want to help us, please be successful. Finish your democratic transformation. Only thus, in this way, you can help us.
Thank you, Oleksandra. The next question, we have not a lot of time, but a lot of questions. So, does the Lugano Declaration highlight or recognize the role and value of civil society organizations active in the field of peace building and conflict transformation? Alternatively, have the authors of the declaration identify any peace building different from peacekeeping needs among civil society organizations in Ukraine? Can you briefly elaborate what they are? Who would like to answer?
I can say that actually Lugano Declaration is not only for the period of war. The idea was that we have the real crucial moment in the history, and for sure the defending of Ukraine and security is the most important issue. But civil society should be ready for the period for after the war, should be ready for the quick transformation of every sphere of Ukrainian life, to elaborate policies in order to realize possibilities we again have, thanks God, we have now for our country, as it was in 2004, as it was in 2014 after the Maidan, and every time we got problems made by Russia, but also we were too weak to realize our ideas, our visions, and our policies. So the Lugano Declaration is mostly about what civil society should do at this moment and after the Ukrainian win. Oleksandra, could you add something?
I think it's enough, because I see that we have a lot of other questions and only 8 minutes left.
Okay, what are your predictions regarding to the possible terms of Ukrainians' acquisition of full membership in the EU?
May I answer like this? We are civil society actors and doers. We are not political prognostists. So our task is not to predict future, but to establish such version of future which we want. And we can tell you with a huge responsibility that people, representatives of civil societies who signed Lugano Declaration will do our best in order to achieve this goal as quickly as possible.
Andriy, what practical steps for the reconstruction of Ukraine can be taken today? Very briefly.
Great question. First of all, we need to realize that triangle I mentioned before, to establish institutions like a fund and a proactive committee, projects committee, or committee of policies with three actors, three parts: international donors, partners, institutions, Ukrainian government authorities, cabinet of ministers and other representatives, and Ukrainian civil society and business. These three parts of every institutions could make a Ukrainian recovery and modernization, not corrupted, realizing Ukrainian interests, oriented on modernization, not just for recovery of post-Soviet infrastructure and the country. It's the first point. The second point, we need to start with fast recovery for sure, but to realize an idea that Ukraine is the next big thing for Europe. Ukraine is the country which will help European businesses and investors to have the territory of fast growing businesses, fast growing investments, etc. Ukraine could be that new big thing for European countries and for Europe. And Ukraine could be an answer on establishing European values around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Andriy. And Oleksandra, this question is for you. I think that it will be the last, maybe before final remarks. What can be done to further strengthen exchange between EU civil society organization and Ukrainian civil society organization? Some practical advices.
My practical advices is very simple. We don't need consultants. We need partners who will working together. I have a competence in human rights field, and now we documenting war crimes. Current moment, we have been documented more than 18,000 war crimes which were committed by the Russians in this after 24 February. And there is a question, for example, how to hold all perpetrators of this 18,000 of episodes accountable. And there is two ways how to respond. The European civil society can send us policy papers, can send us advisors, etc. Or, which is much more needed, join to the process and take responsibility together with us, work shoulder to shoulder, and do the changes together. I prefer the second variant. So my quick answers is we don't need much consultancy. We need consultancy plus responsibility for joint implementation.
Thank you both of you and for very interesting questions. Let me do some final remarks, and maybe both of you want to emphasize something from our discussion before we end. So what I mentioned, very, very important to support Ukrainian civil society, we need actually integration to EU. We need to a real communication, and not only communication, but some practical support, and do something together. And we have a lot of promises, but not clear perspective. And Ukraine needs very clear perspective. How can international society help us to recognize Ukraine as a part of Europe, to help us practically? So thank you for this discussion. Andriy, maybe you want to, and Oleksandra, maybe you will have 1 minute to emphasize, to highlight some the most important points.
Two things. First, consider Ukrainian civil society and business as your partners in anti-corruption agenda and in modernization of Ukraine. Please help us to be the equal part as Ukrainian government in the Ukrainian recovery and modernization process. The second part, please give us the possibility to have a transformation period in order to realize breakthroughs in economic and social reforms. And after that, give us possibility to become a member of EU as a part of European community. Thank you.
Thank you, Andriy. Oleksandra.
I will call to see the whole Euro-integration process of Ukraine not as a problem, but as opportunity for EU itself. I will remind you that 8 years ago, in center of Kiev, people were dying with EU flag. So Ukrainians can bring to EU a new spirit, a spirit of people, ordinary people, who are fighting for freedom, who are fighting for European future, who will not inherit in this well-sustainable, developed institution from previous generation, but who are fighting for a right to build them by itself. And this is a new energy, which I'm sure EU will have added value. And this is something which happened not on the level of material, but on level of idea. But we know from a lot of history's lessons that a lot of things first started on the level of idea and then implicated into force.
Thank you. Thank you for our panelists. Thank you for our guests and audience, and thank you for EAD for organizing this discussion. Don't forget that Ukraine is still fighting, and at the same time we are trying to build a real European democratic country. And any kind of support appreciated, and Ukraine, I think that every Ukrainian is grateful for any kind of support. I have nothing to add. Have a good evening. And one more, thank you for attention to Ukraine.